So the Mohammed Yunus government in Bangladesh has recently concluded 100 days in power, coming to office after after Sheikh Hasina, the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, was deposed after a massive revolution in Bangladeshi politics. Now, 100 days on, we're sitting down with Parvez Abbasi, a professor and noted academic in Bangladesh, to talk to us about the record of the Mohammed Yunus government, what has succeeded, what hasn't, what are the challenges ahead for the Mohammed Yunus-led government. Professor, I'm obliged to you for joining us here on India Today Global. Could you tell us a little bit about the last 100 days of the Yunus government? What do you think some of the achievements have been? What do you think are some of the things that haven't worked in these 100 days of the Yunus administration?
Thank you, Shashank, for having me on your show once more. And I believe you've hit on the nail. 100 days for the interim government of Bangladesh is a landmark of sorts. And as you have correctly pointed out, these 100 days have not been easy for the people of Bangladesh or the government of Bangladesh in terms of navigating its internal problems as well as external relations. There have been some credible achievements which has continued to generate support from a large segment of the population. That's the first thing, that at least the goodwill of the government, as of now, at least people, the large section of the people who are not affiliated with any political party, there is a degree of support on the goodwill of the government in terms of delivering credible reforms and paving the way for elections in the near or intermediate future. That's number two. Number three is the situation, and I believe we had a chat during the month of August following the ouster of the Sheikh Hasina and her government. And during that, from that time onwards to this point in time, if you look in terms of the different indicators or indices, on the law and order front, I would say that there has been some degree of stability that has been restored. The police forces, the judiciary, the bureaucracy, that stage of, or what would I say, that shock of transition is slowly going away, and it's turning, Bangladesh is slowly returning to business as usual. Well, there's always the sky is the limit in terms of the law and order situation. Number two is, again, there was a plethora of, what would I say, agitations and demonstrations that took place from the ready-made garments workers, from, again, different segments of the population, like students, so on and so forth. It at times appeared chaotic, cacophonic, but the realization is slowly sinking in amongst different stakeholders that the interim government in a short period of time cannot please everybody. There's a need for imposing discipline. There's a need for imposing stability. That's on the plus side. I'm just talking about the positives first.
Sure.
And also a little bit delayed, but also the government has also announced commissions and committees headed by, in most cases, well accepted and renowned experts to carry out much needed reforms in terms of constitution, in terms of judiciary, in terms of bureaucracy, to weed out politicization, to weed out corruption, to weed out nepotism. That in itself is also a tangible achievement. The government has taken some steps, belated steps, which the Hasina government had neglected to do in terms of restoring macroeconomic stability, carrying out tough reforms vis-a-vis the central bank's reforms in terms of adopting a contractionary monetary policy or cutting down on bad debt. That's also a good, I would say that's also a step in the right direction. The Dr. Yunus's government has indicated that it will want to continue engaging in productive relations with its neighbors. That also includes India. And we have seen some progress on that front. There has been constructive engagements with the European Union, the United Kingdom, Australia, United States of America. and even with terms of Russia and China and other partners, again, Dr. Yunus's government has indicated that it's willing to engage with each of them in its own respective merits. Those are the good aspects, and it has also taken the major political parties such as BNP, or for that matter, Jamaat and other smaller parties, in confidence up to varying degrees. And I believe that, again, if I read the media reports right, that there will be also substantive discussions involved with the different political stakeholders in terms of coming out with a, what would I say, well agreed upon consensual political roadmap. These are the good things. And the need for carrying out reforms before elections, that I believe has popular support, as indicated by a Voice of America survey that was carried out a few days back. It was widely disseminated. And that showed that, again, people want reforms in the judiciary, in the police, in the election commission, and also in the banking sector, and also want restoration of law and order. And they're willing to give the interim government a certain degree of time. Now, also, along with this survey, another finding is that at least 3 out of 5 of the survey respondents had also indicated that probably a good time to hold the elections would be a year or a year and a half. So those are some of the findings. Now, every coin has two sides. So if these are some of the positive achievements of the interim government, there are also, again, criticisms against some of the failings.
Right.
One is obviously the economic situation. Now, the Dr. Yunus-led government had inaugurated a right royal mess. And this was, and again, the economy had already tanked. There was, again, the government of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had flouted IMF conditionalities and had gone on printing money to keep liquidity in the economy, which had led to an explosive growth in inflation. And we are still reeling from this. Right now, we have to also, again, contract, further round of loans and assistance from World Bank, IMF, ADB, and the likes of development partners. And that has stabilized to a certain degree the macroeconomic fundamentals, but the road to reforms is an arduous one. Along with this, another bugbear of this incumbent government, from which it cannot be absolved responsibility, is this inability to tame inflation. Inflation remains in the double digits, around 10.67%, and also the food inflation is at 12.67%. So food inflation is also a significant, Achilles heel of this government, and how the government reacts to this, or how the government alleviates the pains of adverse effects of inflation, remains to be seen. Having said that, also, we have also seen that, again, in terms of the law and order situation, probably much more remains to be seen, much more remains to be done, especially in terms of remedying workers' discontent in the ready-made garment sector, as you know, which is the lifeblood of our export sector, which earns about 84% of our foreign exchange earnings. So from time to time, we are having periodic unrest. Whether these unrests stem from authentic factors, or are they being fanned and flamed from internal and external actors, whatever they are, the government needs to resolve it. They have taken steps, but also there is also that issue of earning the confidence and the trust of the private sector, the business community. That, I believe, is something that the interim government needs to work on, because, again, not all businessmen are corrupt. Not all businessmen were in cahoots with the former kleptocratic, autocratic regime of Sheikh Hasina. And also, you need dynamic private sector investment in Bangladesh to keep the economy growing. So that bridge between the private sector and the interim government needs to be remedied. And there also remains the thorny issue of, again, the fate of Awami League and its a role in the elections. What needs to be done? So what is, I would say, a very positive development is that both the key leaders of BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and Jamaat-e-Islami, they've indicated that they are against, banning Awami League. Right. Rather, they would let it in the hands of the electorate to decide. But they've also pointed out that, again, those leaders who are involved in crimes against humanity, who are behind enforced disappearance, gross human rights abuse, or corruption and capital flight and money laundering, they should be brought to trial. And I think that finds a major resonance amongst the people. So those are, in short, this is the opening salvo to give you a holistic picture on what's happening in Bangladesh right now.
Right.
After 100 days.
Thank you so much, Professor. Professor, I wanted to, zoom out as well, and you've done me the favor of answering the question holistically. A lot of expectations, of course, are riding on the interim government of Bangladesh. They've talked about a comprehensive reform agenda. I want you to do two things for our viewers. Could you explain to us what are just the keystone reforms that this interim administration wants to achieve or wants to work on before the elections, which you were saying may happen next year? So could you please lay out what those reforms are? Could I also ask you to lay out some of the fear that has been growing around the fact that, look, Bangladesh has seen an interim administration in the past after a period of political upheaval back in the late 2000s, before Sheikh Hasina was elected to her term in office starting 2009. There was an interim government then. There was a sense that it did not achieve what it could have, and then there are big questions about whether a similar fate could befall the current interim government, because interim governments by their nature are not popularly elected. It's difficult for them to often push difficult reform. So could I ask you to do that two-part thing? Explain to us what the keystone reforms are, and some questions about whether the interim government of Mohammed Yunus can deliver those reforms.
Right. Thank you, Shashank. As indicated by the various committees or commissions that have been announced officially, and with, again, government fiat, the key areas where reforms need to be carried out to weed out inefficiency, to weed out incompetence, to weed out, again, partisan loyalists of any party for that matter, would be, number one, the election commission, because an autonomous or an independent election commission, just like the one that you have in India, would be a boon for facilitating free and fair and inclusive and transparent elections. That's number one. And work has started, but I would say that, again, the pace of consultation is slowly picking up. Number two is, again, there has been also simultaneously, there has been committees that have been announced in terms of carrying out much needed reforms in the police, law enforcement agencies, especially the police, rapid armed battalion, which were in the previous regime had the greatest number of allegations in terms of human rights abuse and carrying out unlawful detention, enforcement, and again, killings. So those are, and remember, we are elements of RAB officials and police high officials of the Hasina regime were under the Magnitsky Act sanctions. So that stigma needs to be removed, and there's a lot of residual anger against the role that the law enforcement, a large segment of the law enforcement agencies played during Sheikh Hasina's regime. So connecting them back with the wider populace and winning their trust remains a difficult issue. And number three would be also carrying out effective reforms of the judiciary, which again, at times were seen to be very pliant. And across regimes, it's seen that, again, the regimes were, depending on who was in power, the judiciary's verdict seemed to mirror the wishes of the political masters. So an effective and independent judiciary also is a need of the hour. And number four, I think, which underpins everything, restoring the health of the economy, especially the ailing financial sector, especially the banking sector, which is reeling from bad debt. So those are the key four areas, I believe, that, again, the focus is on the government. But that also brings about that, again, the challenges or the worries. Number one is, and you quite rightly alluded to the instance of the military-backed caretaker government that you had in the 2006 to 2008 interim, before Sheikh Hasina's government won power through elections. Now, at that time also, there was a lot of sweeping reforms, very ambitious reforms, which were carried out with the best of intentions initially, to ensure greater accountability, greater transparency, greater inclusiveness, greater check and balances. But what happened was that after Sheikh Hasina's Army League had won the elections, relatively free and fair elections, I must add, at least in 2008, or 2000 early or 2009, what happened was that, again, centralization of power took place. Hollowing out of the institutions took place. Check and balances were removed. The provision of caretaker government was removed. So, and as a result, what we had was succession of rigged elections, which became increasingly ridiculous, even in the eyes of the ordinary people in Bangladesh and outside. So, right now, the political parties are, or at least the major political parties, sans Army League, whether it's BNP or, for that matter, Jamaat or the smaller parties, they are on board and they're enthusiastic. But it also is what needs to also bear into mind that, let's say, after a year or two, we have carried out some degree of reforms, and after this, whichever party comes to power through electoral means, what is the guarantee that these parties will not turn back on their pledges to reform? That's number one. And that question has not been effectively addressed, but this is a concern that has been raised by large segments of ordinary Bangladeshis and also academic experts. And number two also is that, again, as you know, that reform is a continuous process. Now, the desire or the zeal to carry out reforms should not also blind the people in power to the ground reality. That, as you correctly pointed out, the interim government by nature is transient. So it is an ad hoc arrangement at best. So trying to institutionalize this on a longer footing, on the plea of carrying out or staying in power as long as the reforms are not fully implemented, that might backfire in the long run, if, God forbid, it is being contemplated or attempted. So I think that is also the worry that is at the back of the minds of many people in Bangladesh.
Right. Professor, thank you again for laying this out for us. Could I ask you a question that I'm sure lots of Indians will be thinking about? When we spoke in August, right after the fall of Sheikh Hasina, you said to me that there was significant anger in Bangladesh against India, against the Indian government for backing Sheikh Hasina, who many in Bangladesh see as autocratic, repressive, corrupt. Where do we stand right now in terms of the popular view of India? Has anything changed in the last 3 months?
Well, first of all, is that the first month is, again, as you say, there was a lot of repressed anger that was coming out, and again, I should also point out that it is not only the Indian government that has supported Sheikh Hasina's regime, especially post 2014, when each election became even more questionable. And even my Indian friends and academic experts that we used to talk, they also admitted in private that yes, they know that, again, there are problems of corruption, human rights abuse, and polarization and centralization. But again, for security interests, there is greater collaboration with New Delhi and Dhaka. But there was also Beijing, or China for that matter. There was also Russia. And there were also some European countries, like France, which had paved a very close relationship with Bangladesh. However, again, as I had pointed out, that again, the first month or so, if you recall, there was also a lot of knee-jerk reaction in the Indian media, mind you, and the Indian media also, when you saw that, again, there was a lot of caterwauling, if you excuse me for using this word, or for that matter, a lot of bemoaning and wailing the loss of Hasina and a trusted ally. So many in Bangladesh that confirmed their early hunch that, again, Delhi preferred a state-to-individual relationship as opposed to a state-to-state relationship. But what has happened in the next 2 months, I would have to give credit where it's due. The interim government has also reined in a lot of the anti-Indian sentiments. Reality has surfaced. And if you have seen, even the row regarding the Hilsa fish exports, or for the matter, that has been resolved amicably, or as a matter of goodwill gesture. And again, Bangladesh has allowed the export of Hilsa fish, which actually raised quite a bit of controversy again. That why would we want to do that and we were selling it at a price much lower than the one that our domestic. We are selling at a price to India at a lower price than domestic Bangladeshi consumers were paying. But it was a goodwill method or goodwill token. Import of power, though it's 50 megawatt of power from Nepal through India. Now that has also been kicked off. And again, there has been also ongoing conversations between, again, carrying out previous regional connectivity projects. And I believe quite a few senior ranking advisors of the interim government have stated that they want to engage with India in meaningful relationships, in economic engagements. So I think that, again, to a certain extent, if not completely that harmonious, warm relationship that India wants, but at least the hostility has abated. And I think also the hostility is abated to a certain extent on the Indian side also. So this is a work in progress.
Right.
And I also need to point out again, the anger is not against the Indian people as a whole. The anger is against, and it's not against the BJP government or the Congress government. It is the idea that, again, a certain political party has outstayed its mandate and had managed to carry on free fraudulent rigged elections with blatant support from the Indians or some Indian policymakers. That in itself was something that rubbed the people the wrong way.
Understood.
But to a certain extent, I think that, again, things are improving, and probably the anti-neighbor hysteria has, if not, it has died down, but it's quieted down to a certain degree on both sides of the border.
Right. If I could talk to you about some of the contentious issues, because that they have bubbled up, and I feel like in some of the narrative between India and Bangladesh over the last couple of weeks and months, of course, the trilateral power trade between Nepal and Bangladesh was a big achievement, as was, of course, the gesture by the government of Mohammed Yunus to allow hill starfish exports and remove any restrictions on that. So there seems to be a positive side of the ledger. But I want to also talk to you a little bit about some of the things that could be points of tension between India and Bangladesh. Most particularly is this question of Sheikh Hasina, her, of course, continued stay in India. We, of course, had Indian journalists go and speak to Chief Advisor Mohammed Yunus, and he said, look, we may be taking steps towards extradition, that Sheikh Hasina cannot ask for people in Dhaka to come out and demonstrate against the present government. So could I ask you this? Do you see the Bangladesh government pushing for Sheikh Hasina's extradition? And should India refuse, how would that impact the relationship between the two countries?
Well, the first thing is that, again, one of the reasons why Dr. Yunus's government is in power is because of the sacrifice of a large number of innocent students who had gone out to protest. That is the bottom line, and that's an incontrovertible fact. Now, any government which is in power must also, to appease public sentiments, be seen to look to ensure justice. And in order to ensure justice, again, this is also what has happened is now that the interim government is slowly getting its house in order, and now there's the issue of formally lodging an extradition request to Delhi, asking for Sheikh Hasina's return. Now, what the Indian government should or should not do is the Indian government's prerogative. I must say this. But again, would it be referred into a court of law? Would there be a judicial process or judicial review? Again, that is an Indian prerogative. However, in recent times, one of the reasons why Sheikh Hasina's fate has actually garnered a lot of curiosity is that in Bangladeshi media, there has been at least 2 to 3 audio leaks of the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh talking to her supporters in Bangladesh all around purportedly, because again, the supporters of the former Prime Minister would say that these have been doctored, but again, her detractors would say that these are the genuine articles. Again, now what has happened over here that and I've heard them personally. Now, over there, the idea was that there would be retribution. And again, depending on who comes to power in Washington, we would again sweep back to power. And that had also struck the raw nerve of the people that, again, that realization of the magnitude of the crimes committed has not actually set in. or the fact that what would I say, a sense of vindictiveness is still there. So that has also fanned the flames. Now, what has happened over here is that a lot of it is rumored, because we don't have conclusive proof about this. So we cannot talk about speculation, Shashank, but it's rumored that many of the top tier Army League leaders have found their way into India. If that is the case, and if they have, again, egregious acts of human rights violation, it only behoves on the Bangladeshi government to ask for the extradition to stand trial. Now, it should not be a witch hunt, but it should be done in a fair and transparent manner. That's my personal opinion. Now, if India is committed to carrying out a people-to-people contact with the Bangladeshi people, Bangladeshi state, I think this would do an enormous, what would I say, India's image would be enormously restored if they do accede to the request. However, real politics would also, what would I say, play a factor, and against long-lasting or long-standing security collaboration or long-lasting personal relationships with the former Prime Minister might also come in the way. So it remains, the ball is in Delhi's court. But that is probably because it would be, what would I say, presumptuous of me, or it would be too premature of me to speculate a lot about Delhi's intent on returning Hasina. So let the formal extradition requests be filed, and then again, let us hear again what the NEA has to say about this.
Understood.
So again, we have to wait for the developments.
Understood. Let me ask you two questions specifically about some other disagreements between India and Bangladesh. And India have been getting a lot of play. And this is a question that we talked about, we addressed in August after the Sheikh Hasina government fell, which is the state of minorities. Of course, we had some of our best journalists go speak to Mohammed Yunus, of course, the chief advisor, and Dr. Yunus said that, look, this is propaganda. The idea that there have been unrepentant or unabated attacks on minorities in Bangladesh, or that is a massive law and order crisis concerning minorities is propaganda. He used the word propaganda, and of course, that Bangladesh as a country with fewer resources does not have the power to counter that kind of propaganda. So he said this, and of course, in addition to that, we've had a lot of reporting on this particular story. I would love for you to comment on it as well. Was that the Attorney General of Bangladesh, of course, made an argument in front of a high court where he said that where he called for the removal of secularism and socialism from the constitution, saying that these do not reflect the realities of a nation, but approximately 90% of the population is Muslim. This is something that got a lot of coverage here in India. And the question I wanted to ask you is that, so this is one part of the picture, what we're hearing from top government officials. Some of our journalists have talked to people in, for example, the Hindu community in Bangladesh who feel particularly scared because they do feel, as Amnesty International, for example, said that after the fall of the Sheikh Hasina government, there was violence targeting them. They do feel like there has been heightened religious tension. They do feel slightly scared. And then you have the Attorney General come out and say that actually we may consider removing secularism from the constitution as a sort of guarantee of the rights and freedoms of minority communities. So there seem to be these two very starkly different pictures based on what Dr. Yunus is saying and what some of the reporting in India is suggesting about what is happening among minority communities in Bangladesh. Could you take this on, explain
certainly
what's happening here?
Number one, even before August 5th, there was a marked deterioration in law and order. Not only the minority community, and by minority we're saying that the religious minority community, everyone in Bangladesh was feeling unsafe. I'm condoning the allegations, or again, I'm trivializing this. And after the fall of August 5th, actually, all of us were scared because of this vacuum in institutions. We didn't have any government until Dr. Yunus came in. And even then, the government was slowly being fleshed out with the support of the armed forces. The police forces, a large majority of the police forces went AWOL, if you remember. So, and all of a sudden, in a modern metropolis like Dhaka city, at least in the first 2 or 3 weeks, we had this novel sight of students, school students, college-going students, university students, madrasa students coming out and carrying out traffic supervision, coming out and guarding the local areas, as we say, mohallas and paras, and over there, because again there was a sharp spike of burglars, and again looting and dacoitry was right. I do not know how much of it was genuine, how much of it was a panic created on Facebook. And number three, there were again retributive acts on some members of the former government. Along with this, whenever there's such a vacuum, there are again nefarious elements in every society, whether it's in India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or even the United States of America, who thrive on lawlessness. And there were a few attacks, and nobody is denying this, on elements of the minority community. Now, issue is that, again, number one, who carried out those attacks? Number two, was there a master plan behind these attacks? Number three, were those attacks actually carried out to, again, for score settling purposes, because they were known to be, or elements of the minority community were known to be close to, again, the Army government, or they were perceived as such? Or four, there were deliberate attacks on the minority community members so as to create a false image that, again, the minorities are unsafe whenever Army League is not in power, so that's to sour the relations between India and Bangladesh. Those are some of the four questions. And I would also like to add, Shashank, that again, the intrepid journalists who had carried out, again, from India, our friends had carried out, again, a lot of investigative journalism regarding the attacks on the minority community members. One thing that really missed my attention was, and I believe I have seen this, after the last interview that we had with you, border killings had continued unabated. And one girl by the name of Sharna Das, obviously belonging to the Hindu community, was unfortunately killed within these border killings. But there was not a line of mention in the Indian media. So again, people want to see what they want to see. Were there attacks? Yes. Were there attacks large scale? No. Should the attacks have taken place? Absolutely not. And are the attacks still continuing? No. They have receded. But again, and I do not want to sound patronizing on this one, but we have had a culture of coexistence over here and religious tolerance. So any Bangladeshi citizen should not live in fear because of his or her ethnicity or gender or religious beliefs or lack of thereof. And this is also, and I would say that again, this is not only present in Indian media, also that again, many of the news that we get to see, the Bangladeshi media, especially the social media, that would portray that again, the government, the BJP government in India, or the Sangh Parivar in India is out to carry out, convert the Muslims to second-class citizens in India. That means there is cow lynching at every state. And even in recent time, but I do not believe this, but that is the media hype that is often created. Or the fact that, again, a person as senior as Amit Shah, during the recent Jharkhand elections, he had, and I'm quoting Indian media over there, the print, the wire, the Hindustan Times, that he had stated that, again, in Jharkhand, if BJP is not voted to power, Bangladeshis will swamp Jharkhand, and in fact, the Muslim population of Jharkhand are actually Bangladeshis. Thankfully, that electoral ploy of divide and rule has fallen flat on the face. We do not want to comment on Indian politics, but then again, media often plays this up. But the sense of unease, the sense of uncertainty, that should not be there. And I think the interim government is taking steps, but more so, a vast majority of the people have reacted very badly against the idea that, again, of an idea of divide and rule. Now we come to the second issue over here, that about what the Attorney General has stated. Yes. Well, one of the things is that just like India, where probably 80% of the population belong to the one denomination or the other of the Hindu faith, though India is a secular country in constitution, Bangladesh is also a secular country. But if you remember, during Sheikh Hasina's regime, the constitutional amendment was carried out, and now we have a very anomalous situation where we are a secular country, but we are also Muslim in nature. That is also mentioned in the constitution, if I remember correctly, and that was during Sheikh Hasina's term. So there is an ambiguity, because or there is a duality over here, because it is undeniable that 99 out of 10 Bangladeshis are basically belong to Islamic faith, or that they are Muslims. But it is also true that again, Bangladesh historically has reacted organically against any kind of imposition of excessive religiosity, or again anti-religiosity. So again, we try to come back to a happy median, or the golden median, as they say. So even if this is a personal opinion that has been expressed, I believe at the end of the day, it is the people of Bangladesh who decide what kind of a country we should have. But our country is only rich in terms of its diversity. So that is probably what, even if you look into this, BNP has also the vice president of BNP, Mr. Tariq Rahman, who's in London at this time. Now he has also reiterated his support for, again, the religious ethos, the multicultural religious ethos of the country. And surprisingly, Jamaat-e-Islami has also opened a Hindu wing. I do not know if this is how much of a traction it will get, but that only goes to show a desperate desire to engage with different stakeholders. And if you ask me personally, a country any country will be only enhanced and benefited when it has people of different persuasions, different faith, living harmoniously. But as you know from your own personal experience as an Indian, that despite having a secular constitution, again, often religiosity or excessive religiosity or zealotry rears its ugly head. Now, It's up to the people of the country to decide what kind of a country they need to live in.
I understand. Professor, you made an important point, I think, that, Bangladesh likes to live in a happy medium, right? Where essentially everyone recognizes that there is a multicultural ethos to Bangladesh. That is the kind of country that Bangladesh wants to live in. There is, of course, also duality that the Supreme Court of Bangladesh has in the past ruled that both secularism as well as the institution of Bangladesh as an Islamic country can exist at the same time. But you can understand then that, therefore, even with the constitution, then there exists this duality or this happy medium, one might argue. So then what would be the impetus for the Attorney General to argue that, by the way, we should remove this provision of secularism? Doesn't that disturb that happy medium between religiosity and the recognition that most Bangladeshis are Muslim, but also a commitment to secularism and not letting that interfere in government matters? Doesn't that disturb that happy medium?
Well, again, this is more of likely a thought balloon, and the person who could actually shed more light on this is the Attorney General himself. But I believe after this statement, there was no follow-up from the interim government on this issue. Yes, it might receive support from a certain segment of the population, but in a 90% Muslim majority country, whether there's a need for explicitly stating that we are Muslims or not, or again, reinsuring this or enshrining this in the constitution, that depends on the political parties, stakeholders, and the citizens of the country. So, but in recent times, I believe that pressing issues such as, again, managing the economy, managing law and order situation, getting the business community back on its feet, engaging with the political parties, paving out a political roadmap, those issues have come to the fore. And I think, or even carrying out necessary reforms to the constitution as and when appropriate. I think those are the areas that we are focusing on, because we have had enough of division, we have had enough of polarization and fragmentation in the country of 174 million people. And I do not think we can afford to have more. So there are more pressing, important issues, and I think it's high time the interim government pays attention to this, and I think they are on the right track, at least as of now.
Professor, I have one last question for you, and I'm obliged to you for giving us so much of your time, is on the question of what again is getting some play here in India as a potential axis of difference between the two countries is the feeling here in New Delhi and in India more generally that the Yunus government has actually been much more open to engaging with Pakistan. There was, of course, a direct shipping link that, a direct shipping route that was just a ship that came in into Bangladesh from Pakistan, which was the first time in many years that sort of shipping link had been, direct shipping link had been established. Professor Dr. Yunus has also been very clear that he would like to see SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, be revived, and has also sort of hinted in some senses that yes, in the past there have been strong tensions between India and Pakistan, but we would like to see that forum be revised because we want Pakistan at the table. Remember that for our viewers that in 2016, Bangladesh had actually supported India when it had said that look, it is very difficult for India to deal with Pakistan in these forums if terrorism continues. Now, of course, it seems like the interim government is saying that look, we want Pakistan back on the table, and so there are some questions about this turn in the Mohammed Yunus administration towards more engagement with Pakistan. Can you explain to us where this instinct is coming from to have a better relationship with Pakistan?
Well, the problem is that I think again, if you remember, the SAARC, or the South Asian Regional Cooperation Initiative. Now, that came predominantly from Dhaka during the time of late President Ziaur Rahman's time. And that was a very healthy platform for all of the South Asian countries to engage. And remember, SAARC is no SAARC without India's presence because of its landmass, because of its population, because of its economy. And SAARC was a very lively forum. I'm not saying that relations were hunky-dory amongst all of the 7 South Asian countries, and whether Afghanistan is still part of SAARC or not, that's up for academic debate. But the original 7 SAARC members, I think, again, we are, as a nation, even by World Bank standards, the interregional trade is less than 5% amongst the South Asian nations. Now, again, many countries in East Asia, even within ASEAN, have serious border disputes. They have fought battles against each other. Vietnam and Cambodia to cite an instance, but they are now members of ASEAN and they are trading vigorously amongst themselves. And people are reaping the peace dividend. Now, the major players in SAARC, initially it was India and Pakistan, but now it's also increasingly Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Maldives, Bhutan. Each country carries its own unique perspective. So again, previously what Sheikh Hasina's government had done was again to rupture ties with Pakistan or to ruffle ties with Pakistan to please the Indians, because we had very low stake priorities over there. We didn't sell that much to Pakistan. We didn't buy that much of from Pakistan. And of course, we had this baggage from 1971. Mm-hmm. So, and again, at that time, we just finished carrying out the trials of the senior Jamaat leaders who were involved in acts of genocide during the War of Liberation. I'm just putting it in context. Now, so again, but one also hastily forgets that it was also Sheikh Hasina's government in the late 2019, 2021, when relations with China had blossomed. So the Pakistanis had actually increased their trading footprint with Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh. And if Imran Khan was the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, it was widely rumored that if he had not been deposed, he would be coming for a goodwill visit to Dhaka. So engaging with Pakistan in itself is not a crime. I believe that, again, India itself engages with Pakistan. And despite having a very recent border hiccup, a very protracted border conflict, China and India have made overtures to each other in terms of restoring the relationship or stabilizing the relationship. I believe the trade is over $132 billion. The point being is that, again, at that time, that was more of a stunt in terms of snubbing Pakistan, because Pakistan was seen to be more close to BNP and so on and so forth. But the genuine desire, if you ask most Bangladeshis and across many of the South Asian countries, I cannot speak for India or Pakistan, is that, again, SAARC could be a meaningful forum. It doesn't make sense that, again, the South Asian leaders either talk on a bilateral forum or on the side of, let's say, UNGA or the SCO and so on and so forth. We in South Asia have a shared history, we have a shared culture, and there's enormous potential for trade, cooperation, and growth, and people-to-people contact. And that is again, in my mind, I could be considered to be naive. But again, with the rise of Trump and the mercantilist viewpoint that again, the new trade war that he's promising, we need to find inner avenues for growth and trade. So SAARC as a whole, and this is the emphasis, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, all these countries should try to come together under a common framework where we can agree to disagree and we can find out mutually satisfactory ways of resolving our disputes. So if that is the idea, then this is a step in the right direction.
Professor, if I could ask you, and let me just follow up and close with this very quick question, which is that for a lot of Indians, that access or that a better relationship between Pakistan and Bangladesh conjures up some memories of what happened after the fall of Sheikh Mujib's government back in the 1970s, H.M. Ershad, and that relationship as well. And so it conjures up a time when Bangladesh-Pakistan relations were fairly strong and Bangladesh-India relationships were fairly tense. So it conjures up those memories and it creates a sense that while Sheikh Hasina, for example, back in 2016 was very understanding of the fact that some major terrorist attacks had happened and India was no longer willing to diplomatically engage with Pakistan, that still has not changed very much. And so the question then is that, look, Sheikh Hasina's government was at one point in time it was very respecting of India's red lines. There's a sense that perhaps the Yunus administration will not be as much because it wants to engage more with Pakistan in a more multilateral forum. And for many people, it conjures up a history where a strong Bangladesh-Pakistan relationship or governments that pursue that sort of relationship with Pakistan generally tend to have a slightly cooler relationship with India or a slightly less consideration for India's red lines. Could you, speaking to an Indian audience, address that concern that is coming out in India?
Well, one is the pragmatic school that comes in, and the one is the hawkish school that comes in, the doves and the hawks. Now, truth be told, again, these are also self-perpetuating myths. Why? Because, and I'm just giving you an analogy so that you can better understand this. It is when the United States State Department says that, again, you are one of our strong allies in the let's say in containing China's rise, and they have stated this as much. But we don't want you to have close relationship with Russia. And then you say, look, that we have that strategic freedom or flexibility. Now, if that is the case, that if that is applicable for India, and India is perfectly free to choose its allies and the level of engagement it has with its various allies. And these are, again, at times often conflicting interests, and that's where a very astute foreign policy is called for. Similarly, Bangladesh also needs to engage Pakistan for, again, trade purposes. But people often tend to forget that, again, India is our second largest importing partner. We are one of the top 3 or 4 countries, which in terms of tourists who go to India. Right now, Indian High Commission, because of various reasons, have the number of visas that they had usually issue for people for health and tourism purposes, that has gone down. And see what the impact it has had on the economy of West Bengal. And even for a sustained improvement in Northeast, you need Bangladesh's cooperation. Similarly, we need India's cooperation and collaboration. But again, just because, again, a certain degree of better friendship with or understanding with Pakistan, if it is being forced, again, we are not sure about this. There are talks. But that doesn't mean that it's mutually exclusive to Indo-Bangladesh relation cannot be mutually exclusive to Bangladesh-Pakistan relations. So again, I think that is being oversimplifying this, and this is also playing into the myth that without Hasina we do not have any good strong allies, and I think that paints Indian foreign policy and security thinking into very bad light, because I think it's far more nuanced and matured than this. And also in Bangladesh, there's also, if you have recently followed the press statements or releases that is released, that yes, we also understand India's security concerns. That growing consensus has also been there. So it's a two-way street. It's based on reciprocity. It's based on mutual respect. It's based on mutual understanding of each other's sore spots. So again, India still continues because see, geographical proximity means that importing most of the items from India makes, what would I say, more economic sense for our ready-made garments export industry. So while by the simple fact of, again, transporting goods from Pakistan would only pile up the cost, but that doesn't mean that we cannot diversify. But again, and I believe India-Pakistan, despite all its border conflicts, still have a certain degree of trade between themselves and a people-to-people contact. I'm just telling you again, there are nuances. So it would be, I think we should not rush into pigeonholing this, because that also suits our narrative. Because if I am to put a counter question to you that India is only predisposed towards Hasina, and even if there's a dictatorship, that was the case the last 10 to 12 years, India doesn't care as long as the strategic interests are met. I think that would be a gross oversimplification. Similarly, India, the current regime over here is completely anti-Indian. That itself is not true. However, I believe that there needs to be continuous engagement between the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh. And also there needs to be an exchange of track 2 diplomacy, and there should be also people-to-people contact. Because this desire to paint the neighbor as an antagonist suits some people, but in the long run, it harms the potential for cooperation and collaboration and mutual gain.
Understood. Professor Abbasi, thank you so much for your time, for your candor, and for your honesty, and for helping us declutter, in some senses, some really important issues that have come up in the India-Bangladesh relationship, talking to us on everything from 100 days of the Mohammed Yunus administration to some of the tensions that have propped up between India and Bangladesh, but making the case for more understanding between India and Bangladesh is Professor Abbasi. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me.